Response video to Nick on the subject of capitalism. Yeah, big subject, economics, big subject. He really, simplified it to pieces, so I'll do the same thing in this video. But yeah, I'm going to do a lot of videos on this subject, I think, in the next couple months. It's hard to, all the money trails, all the bullshit that's involved in economic theory or economics. There's just so much of it, and when you really tear it apart, though, it's really simple. Okay, it's about humans producing and humans consuming, and ideally in an economy what you want to create is efficient consumers and efficient producers. It's that simple, I think, and you want to keep all the lines between consumption and production really straight. No crap, no bullshit, no nonsense, no wasted energy, no wasted work. You want all jobs to be good jobs. You want all consumption to be sensible consumption. You're basically trying to create a machine of efficient production. I mean, that's the ultimate goal, realistically. And you're, at the same time, in that process, you don't want to create consumers that are wasteful and frivolous and stupid because they're given the liberty to be so. So anyway, capitalism just feeds off of exploitation, basically. That's the game. You basically exploit labor. You take a profit off of another man's work. That's how the game works. And you can gain productivity by finding a cheaper or more efficient way to exploit. So technology can help you exploit, and then you can just find somebody to work for less, and you've increased productivity, quote unquote. And that's what it feeds off of. And then what it does in the end is it inevitably consolidates wealth, and that's all it does. It just does that by almost the mechanics. It almost is dictated by the way money or work is valued, and the fact that the rich or the capitalists will always be able to take the first bite out of productivity. So they'll always get the first bite, the sure bite, and the biggest bite. And so they're always going to gain. Their boat's always going to rise over time. And if you don't have any balance, any check against that happening, it'll just turn into basically what we've now accomplished again, which is a huge disparity between rich and poor. And we're just basically, the poor are just the servants of the rich. So we're back to France before the revolution. We're back to the United States even before the revolution. And there has to be, before the Depression even. So it's something will have to equalize again. It's going to have to break again, because this is unsustainable, especially in a democracy, because the people won't voluntarily say, yes, I accept my servitude, put the chains on me, I'm your servant. They figure out what they have become. They figure out they're a slave to a system, and they say, no mas, I ain't going to take it no more, F you, and they move on. They say, no, enough of this. And so anyway, Nick just says, it's all about this, fiat currency and fractional reserve banking, and somehow that was the evil that destroyed capitalism. Without that, capitalism would have been just fine. And it wouldn't have been, because the rich would have owned everything, and people just would have rented from the rich. They wouldn't have owned houses. They wouldn't have done any of those things, because money would have been so scarce and so hard to borrow that no poor man could invest in the future. He'd have no, and there would be no expectation. In a gold standard world, your house isn't going to gain, 900% value over 15 years. It's not going to happen. Okay, commodities stay rigid. They all stay connected to that gold standard, and so you're not going to gain. The economy isn't going to grow every year. It's going to be much more stagnant. And so a poor man without resources is all going to be chasing very scarce money to borrow to invest in their future. And so that's not going to be possible. And so the most rational, probably, investment on earth would be the hardest investment to make. An individual wouldn't be allowed to invest in their potential, in their capacity to produce in the future. That would be a hard investment to make. And all the stupid investments, the investments in exploitation, would still be fairly free to be made. So anyway, capitalism is just it's just completely broken. It creates a chaos and a competition that serves no purpose. And a gold standard wouldn't have saved capitalism. Wouldn't have made what killed capitalism in this circumstance. What drove the final nail in it this round. But there's always a nail. Rome always falls. Is Ronald Reagan. We went from tax and spend, which is bad, to the preposterously bad of borrow and spend. And it's the 10 trillion dollars that we willfully borrowed, not that some Federal Reserve imposed on us, that has destroyed our future value. Our future has no value because hanging over it is $10 trillion in debt. That's why it has no value. And then the second fault was a banking system that, yes, we gave them this latitude to lend money, and they collateralized everything based on inflated assets because they presumed unsustainable growth. They presumed that something could grow forever and that there'd be no limitation. It could just keep growing. And so they just presumed that those asset values were real and that there was automatically going to be an increase in them. And so that was their calculation, and that works as long as the growth is sustainable. But there's going to be a wall it hits, and then it's not sustainable anymore. It can't grow anymore, and then that whole system falls apart. And that's where that's the wall we've crashed into now. And so now some people are going to have to jump out of buildings, and poor people are going to have nothing and no capacities to buy anything, and we're going to have to decide how we're going to address that problem when it happens. And I think we can survive it because there's so much waste in our economy. We are disgusting gluttons. We all can minimize our needs and our requirements, and we can all become more productive. And that was one of the great flaws in capitalism, because you see, as you consolidate wealth, that just creates, especially when you, like Ronald Reagan did, destroy the tax base by essentially just saying, yes, we'll make the rich richer automatically by reducing the rich people's taxes. So when we did that, that was the beginning of the end, because we just made the rich richer. They consolidate all this wealth, and then they just create a class of people who are just consumers. They're no longer producers. So we have this legacy wealth that just creates people who have a life built for them, and they don't have to really be productive. They can call themselves productive because they say, oh, I create jobs because I opened a business. But they're not creating jobs. Okay, demand creates jobs. Okay, not suppliers. The demand is what creates jobs. The business is going to have to exist to serve the demand always. It's always going to be that equation, and the person creating the business is relatively irrelevant. And especially if they are preposterously inefficient in satisfying the demand. So if they're just reaping huge profits out of production, the consumers are paying for that. That's the only people who pay for it are the consumers. And so they're always getting ripped off in this system, because this legacy wealth owns production. And this legacy wealth has no incentive and no need to be as productive as they could be as human beings. And that gets down to my point that look, it's all about incentive carrots. That's when you build an economy, you're just basically saying, let's distribute incentives, okay? And so you can engineer that. You can do that rationally. You can say, how much we put here, how much we put here, how much we put here. So everybody has an incentive to produce, and that's ideally what you want to do. You want to put the incentives where you need to get the production, the maximum production out of people you can get. And and then the last thing you want to do is give all the carrots to one mule, and make that mule even worse, dependent on those carrots, and to be just a glutton and doesn't produce anything, just gets fat off the carrots. So anyway, it's and there's no requirement to produce to get the carrots. That's the bottom line, and that's what legacy birthrights just create. That they just create a welfare class. They just create loafers who do what's simple and easy and comfortable. but they never have to really produce. They don't have to do any of that hard sweat, none of that blood, sweat, or tears that makes money really valuable. I mean, money's valuable because people have to die in coal mines, or people have to work 12-hour days even though they got 3 kids at home, or that's what makes money valuable. What it does, money isn't valuable because there's some consumer somewhere saying, I need somebody to trim my bushes and cut my lawn and dye my hair and polish my nails. That bullshit doesn't make, it's not productive work. It's just grotesque and useless consumption. So anyway, there's lots to say on this subject. I think we can engineer a much better system. You can have incentive economics, but capitalism, the idea of keeping control over production in the hands of an elite few, is just bullshit. It is a failure. It would have been a failure no matter what kind of monetary system we have, because it's just intrinsically flawed.